Welcome to Urban Soils. This is one of the modules available online from the Community Tree Management Institute, a partnership of tree management specialists from a variety of agencies and organizations assembled to deliver state-of-the-art information about the safe, effective, and wise management of the urban and community forest. Hi, my name is Dr. Todd Watson, Assistant Professor of Urban and Community Forestry at Texas A&M University. Today I want to talk about something that's very important that unfortunately we tend to not have a lot of knowledge in, but that's dealing with soils, particularly in an urban environment. One of the things that I learned early when I first graduated with my bachelor's degree and went to work in the industry was I don't know enough about soils, and I probably should have had another degree in soils. So quickly trying to catch up and learn about soils, because if you think about it, half of our urban forest is below ground. Soils have a very big impact on the health and safety of our urban forest. Let's just look at a few factors, kind of hit the high point on things that affect tree root growth, because that's really what we're interested in when we're looking at soils, is we want to have healthy soils so we have healthy roots so that we have healthy trees and eventually a healthy urban forest. And so some of these that we think about are water, which of course trees need in the right amount. One of them we don't think about is air, because trees can't take air in the leaves and then move oxygen down to the root system where it's needed. And so air in our soil is very important. We're going to talk about these in more detail. Soil temperature can be important, one from freezing, but also because of the amount of concrete and heat island effects that we get in an urban forest. Soil temperature can cause some negative impacts to root systems. We're also going to talk about soil structure and how it relates to aeration and those kind of things, but it's how the soil is arranged. Soil pH has an impact on the species that we're able to use, and soil pH levels can vary widely in an urban environment. Our minerals that are in the soil are important because trees need minerals in order to be healthy. Soil space, having rooting space, is very critical in an urban environment because trees require lots of space, and having good soil is limited in an urban environment. Parasites can also have an impact, or other pathogenic type, parasitic type organisms that can negatively impact root growth, as well as some of the good ones, the beneficial ones like symbiotic organisms like mycorrhizae that we'll talk about, that have a beneficial impact on root systems as well. So let's kind of define what we're talking about and exactly what is soil. Soils are complex systems of solid matter, air, water, microorganisms, both good and bad, and it's very complex when we start trying to deal with soil and making a healthy soil and trying to grow trees in urban soils. Soils are dynamic. They're constantly changing. They change throughout the season. They change over time. So they're not static. I mean, this is a whole different world underground that we typically don't think about. Basically, soil has four properties. There is the organic matter content of soil. There's the inorganic matter content, which in general we talk about sand, silt, and clay. There's the air spaces in the soil, and then there are also pore spaces that hold water. And all of these are critical. And so when we think about soil, we tend to think about something like this, where we've got a good forest soil, has good structure, texture, good microbial activity, and things that would be really conducive media for growing tree roots in. However, we're not in the forest. We're in an urban environment, and things can be very different when we start talking about soils inside a kind of a demilitarized zone after construction. Here's one definition of urban soils: a soil material having a non-agricultural man-made surface layer more than 50 centimeters thick that has been produced by mixing, filling, or by contamination of land surfaces in urban and suburban areas. That also sounds like a pretty good definition of dirt. So if you remember the previous slide where we were talking about a typical healthy soil to grow trees in, unfortunately, when we look at urban environments, we're dealing with something that looks like this, that ends up being more like a brick, then it ends up being like soil because of all of the negative impacts that have occurred. And so if we have soil that looks like this, it's going to be very difficult to grow healthy trees. So it's important to understand what's going on. There's also some other factors to consider because soil varies by different regions throughout the country. And just as an example, this is here on the Texas A&M University campus. And this is a building called Old Main that burned down in the early 1900s. But you can see this is late 1800s, early 1900s, what the campus looked like. It was a grassland prairie. And so the type of soils that grasses tend to grow in tend to be a lot different than forest type soils. And so this soil doesn't just change overnight. It's still a soil that has had grasslands growing on it for a long time. This is looking at almost the same spot today. This is the academic building, which is on the same site as Old Main. And now look, 100 years later, how many trees there are that are growing in this area. And they're doing fine, but it's still important to remember that we may, even under the best circumstances, be growing trees in a soil type that may be more conducive or more suitable for growing a different type of plant than trees, because we don't necessarily have forest soils where some of our cities are located. Even in a forested area like this one, where you can see the trees in the background and what the area used to look like, now it's being cleared out for a store and a parking lot. Okay, so we're dealing with forest soils, but they're so heavily impacted in space and structure and a lot of things like that, that even when we do have forest soils, it can be very difficult to grow trees because of the impacts of urbanization. And this is just kind of typical of some of the things we see on site. We've got a lot of compaction, you know, kind of ignoring what's already been done to the trees with the pruning. But we've got a lot of compaction. We have different soil textures that are placed in there. We have layering of soils. All this we're going to talk about. But it just really becomes very difficult. And unfortunately, managing the soil is an afterthought. And it should be one of the most important things that we do and that we focus on, especially during construction, because it's not easy to change soil. And it'll be that way for a very long time. Philip Krall, in his excellent book, Urban Soils, tells a little story that, you know, if we were on a construction site, and let's say money's starting to get a little tight, the budget's getting lean, no one would go to the structural engineer and say, you know what, we need to save money on this site. Can we make the beams a little bit smaller, use less steel to save money? Because the guy would just say no. It's not going to put, you know, the engineer's not going to put his stamp on that drawing for that building. But yet, many times, because the landscape work is at the end and the budgets get lean, you know, we may have good specifications for soil preparation or protecting the existing soil, and we end up compromising and allowing bad things to happen that we can't fix. And it's going to affect the sustainability of the urban forest, the survivability of the trees, and at some point we kind of need to get to a place where we just say no. No, that is outside the specifications of what these trees require. These are living organisms. They're not, you know, mortar and bricks and steel, and so we have to create the right type of environment for that.